In honour of LGBT History Month in the UK, I'd like to talk about some amazing queer Harlem Renaissance artists. I've just written an essay on some of these people and I found it so fascinating, so I really wanted to talk about it. Also, even within the progressiveness of queer studies, women, and particularly women of colour, tend to be forgotten, so today I'd like to focus on particularly queer female artists. Therefore, I am by no means going to be covering everything, as the renowned Harlem scholar Henry Louise Gates once said, "The Harlem Renaissance was surely as gay as it was black, so there is a lot out there." So this is designed to just give you a bit of a flavour of some of the experimental and huge creative output of the Harlem Renaissance. So you might be sitting there going, hang on Izzy, what is the Harlem Renaissance? Well, it was a period in the 20s and 30s in Harlem in New York, where black artists started creating all sorts of experimental art, particularly literature, and they also experienced a surge in popularity from both black and white audiences. In my previous video on my favourite black writers, I actually named two Harlem artists, Jean Toomer and George Schuler. Now, I don't have time to go into this fully, but before I get into the literature, it's worthwhile understanding the two major artistic ideologies during this time. One was known as uplift culture and was spearheaded by W.E.B. Du Bois. This was the idea that art should be propaganda for racial issues. It was idealistic, and the idea was that African American art should always be political. The opposing view was supported by Langston Hughes. Rather than idolising the African American, this school of thought wanted to have a gritty complexity to the depictions of black life, regardless if it showed them as depraved. And it is worth noting as well that there was a lot of tension between these two philosophies. The other bit of context that you need to know is the law, and to summarise, being queer was just very much not allowed. Homosexuality between men was illegal according to sodomy laws, and laws about promiscuity and indecency could be used against lesbians. Also, transvestism was illegal and it was possible to be arrested on the street for it. However, Harlem was a hub of experimentation and relative freedom. It was infamous for its prohibited drinking, thriving nightlife, and it was considered a safe zone compared to lower Manhattan because sexuality was less rigidly policed. There were huge drag balls at Hamilton Lodge, there were buffet flats where you could pay to watch people have sex, and there were rent parties with uncensored theatrical performances. Basically, this really was a place for artistic, gender and sexual experimentation. That said, even in Harlem there were still fines and prison sentences for disorderly conduct, so even though it was a lot safer, the threat of the law was still always there. Strange Brother by Blair Niles is a really good book for understanding the sort of weirdly experimental yet at the same time constricted atmosphere in Harlem at this time. One of the two main characters is a gay man, and the book also depicts how people who were sexual or gender deviant were treated by the law. Given that homosexuality was still illegal when this book was written, it is remarkable how open it is about talking about philosophies of gender and sexuality, and in portraying Mark as a normal, functioning, intelligent man, just with a slight difference. For this time, that really was quite revolutionary. That said, if you do want to check this book out and read it, I would give a warning for a lot of internalized homophobia. In Strange Brother, a major catalyst for the characters' encounters with their sexuality is the Harlem Blues. Homosexuality was far from being a secret in the blues bars of Harlem. If you've been wondering what this song has been, this is James P. Johnson's recording of The Dream. It was also known as Bull Dyker's Dream, Bull Dagger's Dream, The Digger's Dream. Basically, it was a really popular tune played by a lot of artists, and according to Willie the Lion Smith, was an anthem dedicated to lesbians. It might even be where the term dyke comes from. Songs about lesbians were not uncommon. George Hanna's Boy in the Boat is basically one long innuendo for oral sex and includes the line,
"Send 'em over there, those Germans who hung, left the women at home to try out all their new guns.
And then there's Memphis Willie B's Bad Girl Blues, in which he complains,
"Women loving each other, man, it don't think about no man."
boo-hoo. Basically, men complaining about lesbians not having sex with them, nothing changes. But that is not to say that women didn't write their own songs. Bessie Smith was quite well known for having relations with both men and women, and Rainey was pretty damn notorious for being a lesbian. In fact, in 1925, Bessie Smith and Rainey were found naked with a couple of other women in their home, and Rainey was arrested for hosting an indecent party. But did that stop her? Oh hell no. In 1928, she recorded Prove It On Me Blues, in which she sings,
Sister, I do it. Ain't nobody caught me. Sure got to prove it on me.
I absolutely adore this song so much. I mean, check out how relatable this line is.
Went out last night with a crowd of my friends. There must be women, 'cause I don't like no men.
It's a testament to the remarkably subversive culture of Harlem that Rainey released this song in 1928, which is the same year that Radcliffe Hall's The Well of Loneliness was judged to be obscene, just for a couple of really brief references to lesbian sex. Rainey wasn't the only out lesbian in Harlem. Gladys Bentley became a legend for her raucous, sexualized parodies of popular songs and her incredible blues voice. She wore men's clothes, was well known for her masculine features, and even changed her name to Bobby Minton so that she could get married to a woman. Sadly, we don't have many recordings of her songs, but she has been mythologized and described in a lot of literature at the time, including Strange Brother, and also in texts by Langston Hughes and Carl Van Vechten. However, in 1952, she wrote an article for Ebony called I Am a Woman Again. In this, she describes her depraved, inverted past, and how she is now happily married to a man thanks to female hormone treatments. This is a really odd article for various reasons. It's almost a caricature of womanhood. It shows her, making dinner for her husband, doing the dishes for her husband, picking out jewellery for her husband, and then it never quite commits to saying that homosexuality is an abnormality. It just says what society calls normal. Either way, this article must be taken with a pinch of salt, because she wrote it during the McCarthy era, so it's very likely that she felt the need to publish it to repair her reputation. But it wasn't just the daring and promiscuous blues singers who were openly queer. There was lots of literature at the time as well. I've already mentioned Strange Brother, and another famously daring depiction of bisexuality and polyamory is Richard Bruce Nugent's Smoke, Lilies and Jade, which was a short story published in the magazine Fire. But to return to queer women, quite a few short story fictions had a queer subtext to them. One example is Nella Larsen's Passing, which is about two black women who can pass for white, and their different approaches to the privileges this gives them. On the surface, it doesn't seem to have much to do with queerness, but certainly the relationship between the two women could raise a few eyebrows. But furthermore, parallels were often drawn between race and queerness in terms of passing and how you can secretly integrate into a society in which you don't quite belong. The story addresses themes of a fluid identity that on the surface pertains to racial issues, but can also definitely be read with a queer reading. But the person I mainly want to talk about is Angelina Weld Grimke, not to be confused with the white abolitionist Angelina Grimke Weld, who was her aunt. Grimke wrote plays, short fiction, and poetry, and she was best known for her treatment of domestic race issues. For example, her acclaimed play, Rachel, explored the problems of motherhood when raising a black child in a racist world. But despite often looking at themes of motherhood, Grimke was undoubtedly gay. In a letter that she wrote to Mamie Burrell in 1896, she asked her to be her wife, saying, "Oh Mamie, if you only knew how my heart beats when I think of you, and it yearns and pants to gaze, if only for 1 second upon your lovely face. Signed, your passionate lover." Grimke's poetry is characterized by a hushed, sadness and longing and frustration, because she had a lot of difficulties with being open about her lesbianism, especially because of the criticisms from her father. Therefore, not much of Grimké's queer poetry is published. However, in some of the ones that she did publish, there are sort of subtle codes. For example, in her acclaimed poem El Beso, published in 1909, she simply elides the femininity of the speaker and the subject. Twilight, and you. Quiet, the stars. Snare of the shine of your teeth, your provocative laughter. The gloom of your hair. Lure of you, eye and lip. Yearning, yearning. Languor, surrender. Your mouth, and madness, madness. Tremulous, breathless, flaming. The space of a sigh. Then awakening. Remembrance. Pain. Regret. Your sobbing. And again, quiet, the stars, twilight, and you. In other poems, she doesn't cover up the female persona, but instead codes the queer desire. This is seen in A Mona Lisa, which is undoubtedly addressed to a woman, but her wish to fall into the woman's eyes and sink down, and down, and down, and deeply drown, carefully implies something more than just a platonic friendship and or admiration. Her unpublished poetry is, unsurprisingly, even bolder. In My Shrine, the speaker adopts a male persona and uses male poetic conventions in order to legitimize her desire for another woman. And then finally, I'm going to leave you with an excerpt from her unpublished poem, Rosabelle, which perfectly illustrates her wish to express her desire, but her fear to do so. Leaves that whisper, whisper ever. Listen, listen, pray. Birds that twitter, twitter softly. Do not say me nay. Winds that breathe about upon her. Lines I do not dare. Whisper, twitter, breathe unto her, that I find her fair. Tell her white, gold, red my love is, and for her, for her. The Harlem Renaissance drew to a sort of close in the 1940s, when white audiences lost interest in the novelty of African art. But the culture has certainly left its legacy. The queer culture of drag balls and coded language in songs and literature still go on to this day. Contemporary gay blues singers such as Gay Adegbelola, Gwen Avery and Faith Nolan have all drawn directly from the songs and identity of Bessie Smith, Rainey and Gladys Bentley. Grimke and other queer women's poetry wasn't published very often, so it's hard to say that there was a direct influence, but certainly there is a remarkable similarity to the themes and styles of their poetry to more modern poets such as Audre Lorde and Adrienne Rich. So that is everything I wanted to talk about today. In the description below I have left a playlist of all the songs that I mentioned and some others that you can check out, and I'm also going to give lots of details about various books and websites you can look at for more information. Whether or not you've come across these people before, I would love to hear what you think. It's amazing how much was produced during this time and how experimental and interesting it all is. So yeah, let me find out what you find, what you like, what you find interesting. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye. Yes. Color and a top, and the wind blow all the while. Ooh, I do it. Ain't nobody call me, sure got to prove it on me. So good.